Colleagues, thank you very much. Can you hear me there? Wow, thank you very much. What an honor. I really appreciate all the way from Zimbabwe. I'm so sorry that I couldn't be with you in Nigeria. I wanted to be in Nigeria to join you, to also be part of this very important platform and important event. But be that as it may, allow me to acknowledge our distinguished speakers, our officials, fellow African brothers and sisters, the esteemed honorables, senators and members of the legislature, members of government. Allow me to also acknowledge the trustees of this very important foundation and all protocol observed. Greetings to you all. I would want to start by saluting and thanking you all for inviting me to be a keynote speaker at this Bridge Leadership Foundation's 11th Annual Career Day Conference. It is a celebration, again, of the organization's 10th anniversary and the 60th anniversary celebration of our founder to this great idea, our Senator. Welcome and thank you. Happy birthday to you. I would want to start by introducing myself to you. President Mandela once said that don't ever make the mistake of assuming that people know you. So it's important for me to introduce myself to you. I answer to the name Nelson Chamisa. I'm an African born and bred in Zimbabwe of Africa. I am a leader of the Alternative Party, the alternative government in Zimbabwe. I'm 43 years old. In fact, I was tempted to say I'm 43 years young because there's always this temptation to go on the side of age in growing old, but I grow young. At 43, I've been audacious enough to lead societal change in different leadership capacities. I've been a student leader. I've also been serving as Secretary General of student body, the Zimbabwe National Students Union. I started this when I was 21 in 1999 when I was doing my tertiary education. I was a youth leader. I've been a youth leader after being elected the national youth leader in the Movement for Democratic Change in 2000, which is the largest opposition in the country. I've been a democracy activist, a human rights defender who fights for justice, fundamental freedoms, rights, dignity and equality in Zimbabwe. I started this in 2000 when I was a student leader and a youth activist. I've been part of the constitutional movement. We've been demanding a new constitution for Zimbabwe through the National Constitutional Assembly then, the NCA. And of course, through that journey, I've also served as a parliamentarian, a legislator. I started to serve as an MP after being elected, the youngest parliamentarian in the Parliament of Zimbabwe at the age of 24. I served as a parliamentary representative in the ACP-EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly in Brussels in Belgium. I also served as the chairperson of the Legal and Procedural Affairs Committee in Parliament. I've been also a member of cabinet in the inclusive government in Zimbabwe, with an inclusive government between President Mugabe of ZANU-PF and Prime Minister Tsvangirai of MDC. We became an inclusive government under a global political agreement. I was the youngest minister then, being the Minister of ICT. If I'm not mistaken, I was just 2 years older than Senator Imoke when he became the youngest senator at 29. I'm a transformational leader. I'm a Democrat. I've been in opposition politics. And I would not want to use the term opposition because it conjures up all these insinuations of adversarial disposition to the governing or the leading party. I'm an alternative, leader because that way we are not, insinuating that there's opposition, there's antagonism, there's friction. That has been the biggest undoing of most of our African contexts in politics, that those who are in government look at those who are in the alternative as stakeholders instead of as stakeholders in governance, in leadership. I've been deputy president to President Morgan Tsvangirai until the time of his tragic demise in 2018, when I was immediately required by the party, by the people, to fill in his leadership shoes just 2 months before the election in 2018. Prior to that, I had served as a party spokesperson and also the national organizer in the party. Of course, when I was elected to be the official representative of the opposition, the MDC Alliance, as a presidential candidate in 2018 elections, this was an alliance of different opposition political parties coming together to form one entity. We won this election, but the election was disputed because it was rigged and stolen. We challenged the result, but lost in the Constitutional Court because of the way our courts are structured and the way our courts are disposed. To this day, we still have that dispute and that contestation around legitimacy and precedence in Zimbabwe, with the incumbent and myself having an issue that has to be resolved, especially considering that the citizens themselves are also raising this as a fundamental issue. When I ran for president, ladies and gentlemen, fellow colleagues, brothers and sisters, I was 40. And it was not just an isolated act, but a product of a process and a journey, a 20-year journey, a 20-year process marked by a number of issues. I may also wish to just share with you that professionally, I'm a lawyer practicing as an advocate with the Advocates of Zimbabwe. I'm also a marketer and a political scientist, having studied political science and international relations. I also studied governance, democracy, and rule of law at the Stanford University in the USA. I'm a family man, married to one wife. Of course, born again, being a Christian. I'm passionate about transformation and transformational leadership, youth inclusion, participation, and involvement. I'm also passionate about the new Africa. This is why I find myself at home, particularly in the context of the discussion and the topic that is before us. I believe in the idea of transformation. The African idea, in my view, is the idea of transformation and accelerated modernization. Whereas the idea of our forebears was a liberation idea, ours is beyond democratization, a transformation duty, a modernization duty. And in that context, I'm proud to be that young and new African, an African who finds himself priding in my being and my roots. And I believe that young people on the African continent also believe in this Africa. This Africa I believe in is my pride, my home. My Africa is a great source of inspiration. My Africa is a place of greatness. This is where you find Nigeria. This is where you find Zimbabwe. This is where you find Kenya. And more importantly, this is where you find yourself. This is our Africa. Our Africa, which is a place where things happen, a place where possibilities are abundant. This Africa is a place that is home to everybody who lives in it, who would want to develop it, who would want to prosper it. This Africa is not just a continent or a geographical expression. Rather, it is an expression of a collective aspiration, an idea that transcends geographical boundaries and demarcations. What I must say is that my personal experience over the journey I've just showed and shared with you is that I've been taught that politics is not just a road that is full of a lot of boobs and traps and treachery in some circumstances, but it's also an opportunity for transformation. And this is why people, especially audacious young people, must find themselves in a position where they are able to not just wait for a handover, but to do everything within their power to take charge and be responsible. In this journey, I've learned that those who are around power don't always operate in and out of good faith. In fact, good faith is not part of the bill. They are always persuaded by the will to power as opposed to the will to transform. Now, young people who are audacious must always be moved by the will to transform, the will to change, the will to make a difference, the will to be significant. Retaining that will to transform is not just a function of conjecture, it is a function of principles and consistency and character. It is actually criminal for one to be young and not revolutionary. It is actually criminal for one to be young and not disruptive. One has to be young, and to be young is to be active. To be young is to make a difference. If you are not revolutionary and you are young, you are dead or you are dying. The leadership journey has helped me to discover this. It has helped me to define and refine the vision that we have, a clear mental picture that we need to form, the values, the consciousness, and the character that we need. And this is my advice to young people. You may work in your communities, in your society. Popular appeal may take you to the top, but it is character and integrity that keeps you there. And this is what is important. Discipline, compassion, consistency to stay the course is a very important ingredient. It's an important function of character. And this is why I would want to emphasize that at all material times, audacious young people must be a conscious group of the enlightened based on values with clear vision to shape the destiny of nations and society. Don't be poor versions of what you are fighting. Don't be poor versions of that which you are trying to replace. Don't be poor versions or carbon copies of that which we are against, but create a clean slate of alternative leadership, transformative leadership, leadership that is based on service and sacrifice. You are never too young to run, but you must also never be too young to learn. Don't be impatient to learn. Build yourself, capacitate, have connections. Because at the end of the day, connection is a point where you are empowered, where your empathy is shown, where your network is shown. Be a reader. A reader is a leader. Change the culture, change the direction, the approaches. The difference is important. Don't listen to those who say politics is a dirty game. Politics is a clean game. But often, politics is a game that is joined by dirty players who then make the game dirty. Young people must be part of politics. Young people must be part of business. Young people must be part of economics. Young people must drive society. Young people must drive nations. We need evidence, statistics, data-based leadership. Leadership by data. Managing things on the basis of information. And it can only be done by the young people. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, it is in this context that I have been asked to happily share my thoughts and perspectives on the challenges and opportunities that exist in developing the African economy and the role of audacious young people and what they can do or play to achieve societal change across sectors, to realize that Africa is only an outcome, a creature of what we input into it. That is what will make Nigeria and the Nigerian dream come real. By the way, there is never a Nigerian dream without an African dream. There is also no African dream without the Nigerian dream. So the two are inextricably linked. Nigeria as a great country on the continent and Nigerians as a great people on the continent stand on the threshold of what could be the greatest transformation in history. By 2030, I understand that it will be one of the few countries in the world with the majority of teeming youths making up total population. That is important. And you will see that today, in the context of this very important topic or theme, the audacious youth leading societal change, when I was given this theme, I immediately leaped in joy. When I saw this theme, a lot came into my mind. I realized, and it was never of any doubt, that the key question of attracting Africans today is to ask the leadership questions that are important. To say, how do we move forward? What is this audacious youth all about? How do you become an audacious youth? What is the role of the audacious young people? How are they able to move the continent forward? How do we build this new Africa? What is it that will make a new Africa new? The courage to make the difference, the impact that you have to cause. What is the end game for this generation and for the young people? What do we do? How do we achieve transformation and modernization? And I bother to check. When we talk about audacity, we are talking about the willingness to take surprisingly bold risks. A series of audacious maneuvers and takeovers, a pattern of fearlessness, brave, unafraid, unflinching character, the opposite of being timid. And I'm glad to know that young people are that audacious. We have seen the audacity in the various spheres of life. And this reminds me of when I went to America some time back. I had visited the United States of America for the first time. I met a brother who received me and ushered me to where I was going. He was from Eritrea. And as he was driving, he drove for almost like 40 minutes. I was wondering, because this was my first time, 40 minutes was too long to be from an airport to my point of destination. I said, but my brother, are we not lost? He pulled the car off the road and said, what's your name, by the way? My brother from Africa said, Nelson. He said, my brother Nelson, have you ever been where you are going? I said, no, I've never been there. I said, let me tell you one thing. In life, it's not possible to get lost if you don't know where you are going. That really moved me. It taught me a lesson that it's always important to know where you are going. I'm glad to say that as young people, you know where you are going, because you know that you have to be audacious and you know that we have to make transformation to society. That clarity, that picture of the future is very important. It will take you where you have to go, but it will also make sure that you also will never get lost. It's impossible to get lost if you know where you are going. And it's important to be informed by your past, because your past shapes and informs the future. But it is also impossible to have a very audacious young people without audacious goals. What are our audacious goals on the African continent? Those big, hairy, audacious goals on this continent. It is to make sure that we democratize Africa. And I must say, the young people of Africa, let us agree and covenant ourselves to say we will democratize our continent. We will occupy corridors of decision making. We will crush, smash, and squash dictatorship and tyranny on the continent. We will silence the gun and violence. We will be peace builders. We will end corruption. We will defeat exploitation and subjugation. We will also make sure that we end corruption. We must transform and modernize Africa. We must build strong institutions. We must make leaders accountable and responsible in society, in the nations, in governments. We must fight injustice and tyranny. We must fight injustice and the breakdown of the rule of law. We must unite Africa. We will lead the world. Let's be leaders. And I'm glad. So globally, our young people, young Africans, have been driving the national competitiveness, economic growth, and achievement of developmental goals. The future is young, and indeed the future is bright. So must be the players. Ask the young people. Look at what is happening across the world. The biggest companies today on the stock exchange are tech companies. Google, Amazon, Facebook, the Microsoft. These companies are raking in billions from youths. But the same youths are not making even millions. They are not making anything. We can't just be consumers without being producers of this information. But of course, we understand that we have others, young people, who are making the impact, who are pace setters, who are pathfinders, like Mark Zuckerberg. But we can have more and many Zuckerbergs on this African continent. It requires us to make sure that we move from just being consumers who are passive to being producers of applications, of solutions, of ideas, and make sure that we rise and take up that dominant position of leadership. It is important that in Nigeria, as we want to continue to make Nigeria competitive as young people, particularly in the future, we have to get the Nigerian youth, and indeed the African youth, to be prepared to be in a posture of being disruptive, imaginative, competitive in both local and global markets, providing cutting-edge solutions and products. On the governance front, youth participation must and has continued to be on the increase, with audacious young people demanding recognition to play an active role in policy making, particularly at the level of the nation. This moment in the world of a global crisis is particularly an opportune moment for us to have a total reformation of manners in our thinking, in our operations, our governance models, and embrace change. Now is the time for us to have a new leadership thrust, a new leadership posture, new models of governance, and new ideas to accelerate African development and unleashing the new Africa. Youth inclusion and participation is such an important element that should not be seen as charity or a gift or a favor to the young people. It is the young people who must realize that they are a key ingredient and a critical factor, a necessity for the continent's renaissance and development. Young people must be transformers, drivers of change, being co-creators and end users of policies and governance that is going to shape this continent. As a result of the new wave of change, audacious young people have been taking the lead in creating local and global strides amongst nations, states, civic organizations, companies. One can actually find initiatives involving youth decision-making processes, building of projects, tackling of challenging issues. All is being done by audacious young people who are no longer playing second fiddle. This demystifying a norm that has been in existence for decades, that young people are passengers and not drivers, that young people are spectators and not players. We are seeing young people as CEOs of various companies on the continent and even in the world. Great youth-led initiatives and organizations are taking place. The creative and innovative approaches of solving societal issues is taking hold. However, we need to see more young people stepping forward, also coming to play that role, to make sure that they play a pivotal role in unleashing our continent to that next level and establishing ourselves as young people as solid and complete nation builders going forward. I'm also very excited to note and realize that the audacious young people are no longer playing second fiddle. They are now the ones who are defining the trajectory of our continent, the path forward for our continent. African youth have always been known for being audacious and brave. Look at the liberation struggles. Just remember the role played by the township youths, the Soweto uprising, youth in colleges, youth and university students in campuses and colleges. They've continued to define and shape discourses and narratives that lay trajectories not just for society, but for nations, and indeed for the continent. Since time immemorial, Africa has been the most audacious and vibrant youths have been seen on the continent, globally, leading change across various sectors. A vast potential of youths are consistently continuing to make that effort to break cycles of poverty, conflict, hunger, inequalities that have continued to bedevil our continent. Our heritage and history is replete with audacious young people, our forebears, who shifted the landscape of our nations in their youth. Even in the Bible, we have people like David, who, when they were faced with the Goliaths of their time, they were audacious. They had audacious conviction, and in many instances, they were victorious. This lineage of our powerful young leaders goes beyond our liberation movements to centuries ago. We've also seen the great people who fought and founded this continent, whom we respect. People like Kwame Nkrumah, Ahmed Sékou Touré, Julius Kambarage Mwalimu Nyerere, Robert Mugabe, the young one, and not the later version. And let us all understand that these were great people who fought to preserve and prosper our country. Our duty is to advance and perpetuate their legacy and transform this great continent. It is important. And I must say that as we go forward, we have also seen the duty of informal traders, teachers, who have played a pivotal role, community mobilizers, young people who have done wonderful things. In Kenya, we had Wawira Njiru, who founded the Food for Education program to address inequality in the schooling system, since many children did not have regular meals. And this initiative has been fundamental. It has been key. It has provided more than 300,000 meals to Kenyan children from this inception. In South Africa, we have Mantisa Dianti and a group of passionate young people who have been pursuing social contracts with elected officials to ensure access to water, sanitation for the poorest of communities. Her work with the Social Justice Coalition works to improve policing and criminal justice system, while their local government program drives their agenda for informal settlement services and infrastructure. In West Africa, you are all aware of Yaga and this very important team that led the process we have seen is very crucial. You remember the program led by my brother Samson Itodo and Cynthia Mpamalu, having been agents of change, raising awareness among young people about the opportunities and the urgent need for their participation in political processes, while it's also advocating for legislation that ensures this participation. You know that there was Aya Chebi, who has been a prominent voice in amplifying the powerful solutions youth are driving from the ground up. In South Africa, you know the Fees Must Fall campaign, largely driven by young people, young students on our continent. In Malawi, we had change, where the Malawi human rights defenders, defended by young people, led by young people, the civil society. In DRC, we had La Lucha, citizen-led movements, have brought numerous cases. They have also brought cases of state capture and corruption into light, and making sure that they hold truth to account and truth to power. Our youth are leading these movements, and their work must be supported to remove the veil of secrecy, to remove that which continues to perpetuate impunity. Nigeria has many examples leading, of change by youth. We had the issue of End SARS movement, which has been an inspiration on the continent, when young people resisted police brutality. Not too young to run and ready to run campaigns led by Yaga, as I have already indicated, are very important and exceptional examples of inspiration of audacious youth. Women are continuing also to lead efforts to rehabilitate former Boko Haram militants into their communities. We expect efforts by the young people. But what is so important is to appreciate that in all this, young people have always been carrying a heavy load. The heavy lifting, the dying, the pain that they've continued to endure is not equivalent to what they get at the end of the game. They have not been given the respect they deserve. They have not earned the respect that they should earn because we are not understanding. So where should we be? As I go into the critical things we must be looking at, we need obviously to look at the most important thing, which is to have a value-based leadership, to capture the current opportunities that are going to be there for us to transform, industrialize, and move Africa forward as we build Africa from bottom up. We need deep conviction, integrity to raise this awareness. It is very important that to understand this, we have to understand the challenge that we are facing as Africans. It's not possible to have a solution without a clear articulation of the diagnosis of the problem. That prognosis of the solution is very important. And I will then go to the second item, which is the leadership challenge which we have on the African continent. What is the African challenge? I would say today Africa faces one problem alone. Today Africa faces one challenge and one challenge alone, and it is a leadership challenge. The African problem is a problem of leadership. It is a leadership problem. Everything we see upside down, everything we see in shortage is but a shortage of leadership. Nothing more, nothing less. Today, the continent continues to have a multiplicity of evidence of the shortage of leadership in health, in education, the challenges we face. UNICEF just gave a startling statistic that 5.2 million children under the age of 5 die. And that is dangerous. Well, most of the deaths are actually happening in sub-Saharan Africa. A shocking revelation was made by UNESCO that most of the children are actually excluded from education. Over 1/5 of children between the ages of 6 to 11 are out of school, followed by 1/3 of the youth between the ages of 12 and 14 who are actually out of school. And without dealing with this issue on an urgent basis, Africa is in trouble. But to be able to deal with this, we need audacious young people who are going to confront the reality that we face and move the country forward. The majority of our young people, as you know, are struggling to put food on the table. Let it be understood that as we move forward, education is going to be key. Education is going to be very important. The desperation that we see affecting the young people is a desperation that we must be able to deal with. It's very important that as we deal with this, we're able to move in a direction that will help us, a direction that will make sure that young people are not subjected to drugs, to substance, to abuse. The majority of our young people are struggling to put food on the table, let alone improve their educational skills and even have better economic prospects. Even those who possess educational qualifications enter into this abyss of unemployment, joblessness, and even few job prospects. This desperation is a driver in the bus of vulnerability, which has many destinations. The destinations of extreme poverty, destinations such as slavery, manipulation, drug abuse, even human trafficking, substance abuse, not to even mention death itself. Outside the economic inclusion, the structural transformation, economic development benefits only accrue to a few. Economic development without democratic governance and fundamental structural transformation is not sustainable. It is simply a ticking time bomb for the continent. It is both shameful and ridiculous, even absurd, that the continent that ranks as the most endowed in natural resources, both above and beneath the ground, is full of hopelessness. The poor and starving people. Our collective conscience as African leaders, as scholars, must be such that we are able to move even policy experts, our activists, our artists, business people and citizens to not allow this to continue. We can't ignore the plight of the young. We have to do something and let the young be at the forefront of doing something about themselves. Today, you look at the challenges that are emanating from this leadership challenge I have underscored. This leadership challenge I have underscored makes it so ridiculous and bizarre that the vaccine rollout during the COVID-19 pandemic is unequal. Western nations have strongly opposed Africa's attempts to challenge and change this trend. We have seen it. Quartz Africa recently published that although 3 billion doses of COVID-19 vaccines have been administered in the world so far, 1 billion have gone to the rich countries, which have a population of about 14% of the world, while mid and low income ones have only received leftovers. COVAX, a global coalition that was set up by the World Health Organization, WHO, and several non-profit organizations to deliver COVID-19 vaccines to developing countries, have so far delivered less than 90 million doses of the 2 billion it was supposed to deliver by the end of 2021. A business icon, Strive Masiwa, born in Zimbabwe, but a global leader, a global business leader, and founder of Keynote Global, has indicated that the failure to deliver vaccines must fall squarely on those countries that seek to subvert the ability of our continent to also achieve this important responsibility to their citizens. But what bothers me is that with all the universities and exceptional learning institutions on this continent, from Cape to Cairo, we must not continue to depend on aid for solutions. We can't continue to depend on aid for ideas. We can't continue to depend on aid for vaccines. We can't continue to depend on aid for food. We can't continue to depend on aid for technology or for development. We must invest our minds and ideas to our own development. Young people must ask themselves the important question: what am I doing better to better the lives of our people on the continent? Not only that, young people must also task themselves to a great task to say, what can we do to make a difference? As I said, the leadership challenge gives birth to the corruption challenge. The greatest vice destroying nations in Africa is corruption. Corruption is now a religion in Africa. Most leaders have been caught with sugar granules on their mouths, literally with their hands in the cookie jar. Our problems are of our own creation. We loot our own resources. We steal from ourselves. We squander our future through corruption and kleptocracy. And we store away ill-gotten wealth and monies in offshore accounts in far field, in other continents. The shocking figures of illicit financial flows out of Africa are evidence of this. We have all the raw materials, but import even toothpicks. We have even gone to do bizarre things to import even culture. We need to deal with this. Because of the leadership challenge, we failed to decolonize ourselves, our minds, and decolonize Africa. If we seek to shift the global landscape significantly, which we must do, and which we must, it is important to construct a narrative that includes equal opportunities for all Africans, for African economies, for African governance, for thought leadership to take root and to be embedded so that we embrace our identity. As you know, our history as a continent of Africa is that of unity, and a single borderless continent without the current colonial boundaries imposed by the Berlin Conference in Germany and not in Africa. This is an endowment we must re-establish as young people of this continent. One of my most celebrated, Frantz Fanon, an author, warned that political emancipation from colonial powers would not necessarily deal with the colonization of the mind. We need to decolonize the mind. Our minds need emancipation from the shackles of oppression, exclusion, self-hate, and all the limitations. We must become what we believe of ourselves. We must overcome the oppressor syndrome, the impositor syndrome, that dulls our voices, that leaves us in a situation where we feel we are second class. We need to be able to deal with this. We are not ready. We are not able to make a change. We are not qualified. These are stereotypes that are being imposed on us. And I believe time has come to renew and embrace once again the Pan-African dream for integration and opportunities. And this is what will hold our economies together, building on regional value chains in strategic sectors. This work is important. It must be driven by indigenous knowledge systems that are driving informal trade and finding ways to open up this space for young people and their business to access value chains. The time has come to identify and empower the bright sparks amongst our youth that are driving change. governments, political parties, civil society, and business. They all have an important role to play to create these platforms for the sparks to become raging fires that inspire and activate more young people to shape their future. We have to move from being knowledge consumers to being knowledge producers. For far too long, we've designed our systems on the back of colonial education systems, theories of development, and similarly, the outlook of possibilities has been shaped by these perspectives that are narrow and limited. We've had classifications like first or third world, modernization or undeveloped, developing or not developed, most of which are challenging, and we must challenge these narratives. How we define our aspirations, the path going forward to realize these aspirations is our unique strategic positioning. We cannot simply copy and paste that which has been implemented in other contexts. Instead, let us work with what we have on the ground. While we are embracing opportunities that digitization, artificial intelligence hold for us to leapfrog our economic transformation, we need, as a matter of mass, to build on economic development that is based on sustainable change, transformational change. How we manage political accountability and democratic transitions in the midst of many warring trends is a critical component and of critical importance. We have seen the rise in authoritarian consolidation, state capture, the independence of institutions like our electoral management bodies, and the judiciary must be maintained and protected jealously, guarded jealously. From Eswatini to Uganda, Zimbabwe, Cameroon, and many other countries in Africa, we have seen violent crushing of our youth as they demand better leadership, as they provide better leadership. State capture is the dark hand that will cripple our ability to transform our society. Disputed elections continue to be a big issue. Africa can be turned into a hotspot of good governance, accountable leadership, responsible leadership, modern leadership. But alas, it has been turned into an outpost of tyranny. Those who are running Africa are ruining it. The forces of autocracy are on the rampage, turbocharged in repression and oppression. We are witnessing the scourge of unaccountable power. We have had a new wave of private power militarists that either operate above the law or outside the law or without the law. Africa has, to a certain extent, mutated and been sliding back on fundamental issues that we are supposed to deal with. Yes, we were born out of an armed struggle, but the cornerstone of the armed struggle was civilian control. But the absence of rules, laws, regulations of armed outfits is what will reduce our important military institutions into being banditry outfits. Such is the danger we see in our other countries, where militarism run the risk of negating the gains of independence and liberation. We are witnessing the rise of the phenomenon of elections without change. This is the dangerous path we have been on. It's a dangerous phenomenon on the continent, where we have seen, particularly in countries where opposition or the alternative never wins, elections are just a ritual, but rigged and contested, producing unstable and illegitimate governments. Coloniality and the rising of new imperialism is also a big issue on the African continent. If colonization was bad when it was done by the West, it must be bad if it is done by the East, North, or any side or direction. It is equally wrong. Fighting colonialism, imperialism, slavery, or any form of subjugation is an imperative responsibility. Self-determination, sovereignty, self-governance remain very critical. African struggles must and shall continue to be rooted in the African worker, African women, African youth, who must be the pivot of all the struggles on the land. Bread and butter issues are key and must be advanced. God did not create us to eat and die, but to leave a legacy of a great African continent, a legacy we are able to bequeath to future generations. A legacy we're able to say we did our bit and we did it to the best of our ability. We need a shared African dream. We need a shared African promise. Our shared values, strong institutions and integration. The new Africa will be anchored on leadership, entrepreneurship, creating the next generation of African entrepreneurs. And it will take a new education system, a problem-solving mindset, a multidisciplinary learning literacy, technology literacy, leadership principles, making sure that our education is not just about regurgitating history, but about scoping and sculpturing future concepts and narratives that will change our nation and our continents for transformation. Society must produce and celebrate entrepreneurs, innovators, researchers, job creators, business builders. Celebrate even patents, new knowledge systems that are meant to take us to that level. Technologies should be also embraced. The Internet of Things, blockchain technologies, fourth industrial revolution. We need to make sure that we embrace nanotechnology, autonomous vehicles, drones, in our quest to make sure that the continent is indeed a transformed continent. We can't do this without building on infrastructure, having an enabling environment within which good governance thrives. Government policy, macroeconomic stability must also be sorted out. We must seek to put in place pillars of civilization, pillars of water, pillars of power, pillars of transport networks, pillars of ICT, and pillars of housing. These are critical lines of civilization we must put in place. Young people must lead in peace building. Change relates to quality of life. We cannot have natural resources, beautiful environment, yet dying of disease and living in squalid conditions with donations. Change demands that we all prosper through equitable allocation and wealth beneficiation of our natural resources and sustainable development. Change relates to a mindset. We cannot be a continent of young people without the young driving the continent. While we must celebrate those who are leading the way in various sectors, change must mean that the youth must take center stage, a leadership role in societal development and continental affairs. The liberation movement was not a joke. It was not led by cowards. It was not a bunch of cowards, but it was led by strong young women and men, brave lions who showed courage. Courage to make a difference. Courage to change a future. We must resist this temptation of hopelessness and make sure that we persuade each other of the clarion call of now, the duty to make a difference, the duty to make an impact. We must bear the new Africa. But what does it mean to make a new Africa? It must be a new consensus of what a new Africa must look like. It must entail a new agenda, and in my view, it must actually make sure that we bury all the relics of colonialism, and we should continue to ride on the future that is awaiting us, and bury the tired excuses of blaming the past for all our circumstances, and press the case for transformation. We need transformation of our generation. And you know that transformation must be led by the young. It is important that we have a mindset shift, a heart set shift. Ideals are from the heart, but ideas are from the mind. Let's think outside the box. Let's have this very important perpetual question, incessant motivation to be different, to be job creators and not job seekers, to be employers and not to be employees, to be leaders who lead not on the basis of what they want to be, but on the basis of what they want to do to make a difference, to be thermostat leaders and not thermometer leaders. Thermostat leaders change the environment. Thermometer leaders just test the environment. We need a generational, intergenerational consensus led by the young to transform systems of governance, to transform structures of governance, to transform institutions of governance, so that we are able to cause agrarian transformation, industrial transformation, and technological transformation. It is important, and you must remember that Yes, in as much as we need the skill to lead, there must be an important aspect of the will to lead, to build the capacity to lead, administer and build and formulate policies and deliver on them. That is what we must do, so that we are able to develop leaders and a leadership, regenerating development leaders who are going to be a continuous enterprise unto our continent. This is an important one. This is an audacious generation. We can do it. We can take the land. Don't freak the giants. If you are not too young to vote, you can't be too young to be voted for. Young people, go and occupy all the chambers. Chambers of the executive, chambers of cabinet, chambers of parliament, chambers of local authorities and councillors, chambers of the civil society and community programs, chambers of commerce and business. Politics drives economics, and economics pivots politics. The two go hand in hand. A long-lasting change will require young people to act boldly and to act local, but think globally. What may look small as small giants are great giants. This is the giant steps we must take. The challenges we face today require courage, resilience, and deeper conviction. I want to end by inputting a very important point as I call youth to courage. I call youth to courage to all young people. I want to end my input by launching a call to courage to all young people across tribes, geographic spaces, economic standing, languages, and political affiliation. A call to courage to radically transform how we can do business, how we can govern, how we can dream. A call to courage that sets up African Renaissance Fund and a new fund to support youth development and leadership capacitation. A call to courage not to give up in the midst of adversity. A call to courage to join forces with other people, old and young, who help us to move forward. A call to courage to believe that our present realities are not a handicap or a prison. They are a motivation to build a better tomorrow and the next generation. We are all part of something much greater than ourselves. Young people of Africa, nothing can stop us. We are a raging train and a rolling lion. We are rolling lions. The will to fight is essential. Like what was said by Steve Biko, it is better to die for an idea that will live than live for an idea that will die. Let's keep fighting. Nothing comes without a fight. Nothing comes without a courage. Nothing beats acts of courage. Our duty is to fight. Our duty and generational mandate is to make sure that we discover our mission, fulfill it or betray it. And this is what Frantz Fanon says. Great people make and write great history. Let us write history. Let us fix the future. Let us make Africa great. It's time. The time is now. The journey begins. May God bless you and foster you big ideas that will change our continent. One Africa, one people. God bless Nigeria. God bless Africa. God bless you, all young people of Africa. I thank you.